When Georgia's healthy, they're unstoppable. That was the reaction tonight from Greg McElroy, Dean Legge, Matt DeBerry, Ryan Curley, talking about how the Dogs are once more ranked number one in the country, Matt, and the college football playoff. I mean, it's not surprising. Kind of your reaction from the night. Georgia at 1, and then 2-3 Michigan, Ohio State. 4 was UW jumping Florida State. That was basically what happened.
Yeah, I agree with that, with what Washington's been able to do. They just win games. It's not always pretty with the Huskies, but they win games on the road. They know how to gut it out and play their best when the game is on the line. So I have no problem with them being fourth ahead of Florida State. Of course, Ohio State and Michigan played this weekend. I think the loser of that game is done, Ryan. But as we've talked about for a while now, this Georgia team does look unstoppable. Now that they're getting healthier and healthier, we barely saw Ladd McConkey, so it's tough to say that they were even at full health against Tennessee. Still just throttled them. Georgia Tech's in a really tough spot. The Dogs are number one. Everyone knows it. And I think there's a decent little gap now between them and the number 2 team, Ryan.
Oh, there's definitely a gap. The Washington thing is long overdue. Long overdue. I don't know. That's my take on that. I feel like I ranted about that last week, so I'm happy that they finally put Washington at 4 over Florida State. Yeah, I don't know how you can justify keeping Ohio State or the loser of that game in if a lot of other teams are, kind of making their case there at 4. But I do think there is a gap for Georgia between Georgia and Ohio State there. I think there's a pretty big gap. If everyone has Georgia as the 1 and it's that clear, and I don't think I've seen any expert take that disagrees with that in the last 2 weeks, there's definitely a gap.
Yeah, y'all, and it's certainly, the way they've played lately, the 28-point win over Tennessee. I can't remember what the score was against Ole Miss, but it was ugly. And then the 9-point win over a top 10 Missouri team. They've got 3 wins over ranked teams. If they close this out, they'll have 4, probably 2 in the top 10. They would clearly be the number 1, Matt. But if they lose the SEC championship game, now I talked earlier this week where I do feel like they are one of the best 4 teams, period. But we're in Never Never Land with the college football playoff, where just because you're the best team or one of the best 4 teams doesn't mean that you're going to be in the playoff. I mean, Ohio State and Michigan, for me, are clearly better than Florida State. And Florida State's going to, it might be more difficult than it was, but Florida State's got to win 2 games that are very winnable, and they're in the playoff. And for me, they're probably number 7 or something like that. But that's me.
Yeah, Georgia's the most complete team. We've said it for a while now. Michigan, passes the eye test, even though they haven't really played anyone except for that Penn State. But they couldn't throw on Penn State. They ran the ball the entire time. If you can't throw on Penn State, you're not going to be able to throw on the Dogs. I don't believe in Kyle McCord, the Ohio State quarterback, who's not very good on the road, and he hasn't been great against top 25 teams. That's not a guy who I believe can beat the Dogs. Washington has some talent, but they can give up a lot of points. Georgia would score 40, probably 50 on Washington. They're the most complete team in the country, and they've proven it week after week after week. Ever since the game against the Gators in Jacksonville, this team's been just rolling. Offense, defense, special teams, clear number 1. But like you said, Dean, if Georgia does lose to Alabama in Atlanta, you can't tell me they're not one of the best 4 teams in college football. They are, no matter what happens in Atlanta. But like you said, I think they might have to be forced out of that top 4 if Texas wins out. And you've got the winner of Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State wins out, they're in. If Washington wins out, they're in. Tricky situation, but Georgia's absolutely one of the 4 best teams, even with a loss to Alabama. I think they're going to win that game. Clear number 1, though, and everyone knows it.
Yeah, I think I got kind of stuck on something you said at the beginning of that. I don't think Michigan passed the eye test this past week.
No.
Yep.
They did not pass the eye test. So, I feel, I was pretty high on Michigan. That's dropped a little bit now. I think this Ohio State game is going to be a real fight, and that was a game I was for sure Michigan was going to win. I'm not as certain as I was before. Yeah, if it is for best and Alabama doesn't obliterate Georgia, if Alabama wins and it's not just a smackdown, I think we'd all have to take a step back and really assess that if that's what happens. Um, it's hard to justify that if we're calling it the four best teams, but has that ever been established what it is? Are these the four? That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think
And
that's
at this point,
that.
I end up just mad every year.
Let me just say this: I think that is a major problem, and I think that's why going to 12, although there's a couple game burden, then you're getting a really good reality based look at things. I mean, in this year, if Georgia loses the wrong game, they're out, and they're still one of the best teams, and they should be in the playoff. But that's up to them. Hey, make sure you're picking up our 2024 recruiting guide. You can get it free with Double Dogs. You can just buy it straight up. I'm not printing a bunch of these, but if you sign up for our newsletter, the link is right down below. You're going to be entered into possibly winning one just straight up. So I'm just going to randomly draw it when I start sending out the magazines. A lot of folks have taken advantage of getting Double Dogs and the recruiting guide, both. So you take advantage of that today, but if you want to roll the dice and just do the newsletter, that's fine. That link is down below. But look, y'all, I mean, they have the way this is setting up right now is if Matt they beat Alabama, which I expect them to do too, to be honest with you. It might set up. It looks like it is actually going to set up to where they'd either get Florida State. I mean, it's looking like it's probable that it would be Florida State or Texas. And you're laughing about Florida State. I mean, I kind of agree with you. I mean, I think Georgia would destroy Florida State in its current state, Matt.
Georgia would crush them. Georgia would crush Florida State. And, Ryan's shaking his head. I think everyone watching this with Jordan Travis out, I think would agree. They've got some talent. There's no doubt about it. But they're not on the same level. They don't have that winning program DNA, that toughness, that tenacity. They're on the rise, and maybe they'll get there in a year or two. They are bringing in a lot of, five-star talent, some of them from the state of Georgia. I know their recruiting class really well, but it's not this year. They're a year or two away from, I think, being a true national championship caliber team, a team that could win it. It's not them this year. But I think Texas is probably going to win out. Would they get Kansas State or someone in that big championship?
The scenarios in the Big 12 are more complicated than an AP calculus test at Tucker High School in circa 1995. I mean, it is bizarre.
They let you in that class?
What's that?
They let you in that class?
I was asked to leave the AP classes at Tucker if you're keeping score at home. Everyone at Tucker can confirm that too. But it is a kind of a wacky situation. Oklahoma and Texas. I'm sorry. Texas is the most likely. After that, it gets really weird. So I don't even really want to discuss that. We were listening to the Texas broadcast, Ryan. I don't know if you remember that on Saturday night when we were literally in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in the Smoky Mountains between Tennessee and North Carolina. And they were really whining at that point about the Big 12. Hey man, you're going to be in the league soon, so there ain't going to be any whining then. Well, there might be. We'll just see. Some of these teams are really good at it. But I think that, Ryan, when you get down to it, Georgia is completely in control. They got the seatbelt on. They're driving down the road. They just need to beat Alabama and take it from there. Because I think if they beat Alabama, I don't think they lose the semifinal. They could lose in the finals, but I don't think they'd lose in the semifinals. So the Alabama game is critical because it's really do or die at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama could end up being the toughest game for Georgia.
Yes.
That wouldn't be a surprising thing to any of us, I don't think, because right now it seems like Alabama's one of the four best teams in college football. I think Alabama would beat Florida State. I think Alabama would beat Washington. I think Alabama would beat Oregon. I think Oregon's really, really good.
I think Oregon would be the one team where
Alabama would beat Michigan.
I think they would probably gut it out against Michigan and Ohio State. I don't know that I would take them against Oregon, but and I think right now, if I'm guessing, this is pure speculation and guessing, Matt DeBerry. If it were me guessing, it would be that Georgia will play Georgia Tech. They'll beat Alabama. They'll play Florida State or Texas, but probably Florida State. And then they'll play Oregon in the national championship game. I would not be surprised by that 3-game stretch at all.
Yeah, playing 5 games against Bo Nix would be something. The
They'd have
storylines
to really play well to beat Oregon. They'd have to really play well to beat Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon's playing their best right now, and they should have beat Washington. We've all said that several times. Dan Lanning, too aggressive. If he's even a little more conservative in that game, they beat Washington. But Oregon's playing really well. Texas, it seems like they're not playing as well as they did in the first half of the season. I don't want to say they're struggling, but they're not passing the eye test for me like they did early in the season, knocking off Alabama at Bryant-Denny Stadium. But obviously, if Alabama beats Georgia, they're going to jump everyone they need to. They'll be in that Final Four. You can't leave out an SEC champion. But if Florida State, 1 loss, they're done. I think if Washington loses 1 game, they're done. I've got to take our picks for Michigan, Ohio State. I'm excited to see what y'all have to say about that game. But part of me thinks it'll all kind of, clean itself out. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the Dogs. They're number 1. They take care of business. It should be smooth sailing to the playoff if they do get Florida State. But it's all about beating Alabama. I think they can do it, Ryan. Just got to get it done.
Yeah, no, they should beat Alabama. They should beat everyone they play. That's been 45 games now that we could say 40-ish, 40 something.
That's the standard.
Like, where they 41 games in a row where they should beat the team they're playing, and only once has that not happened in that stretch, and it was against Alabama in this exact game 2 years ago. But they're better than everybody else, and this last month proved it. I mean, they passed the gauntlet with flying colors.
Real quick, I got a question. If Georgia knew they were going to the playoff if they lost Alabama, they knew going into that game. I think Kirby Smart was telling George Pickens, hey, if it's not your night tonight, we're going to get them again. They knew that. I think if it was on the line, the season was on the line, beat Alabama, and you're in the playoff in 2021, they would have played a little better and made but with this year, where they probably do have to win that game to get in, they're going to be laser focused. I have a hard time thinking that they come out and don't play the way we've seen them play for the last 5-6 weeks now.
We're going to see. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the website.